Welcome to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences and sonic landscapes. My guest on the program is Högni Egilsson, an accomplished multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, and composer for film and television. Högni is from the enchanting landscapes of Iceland and has become an established fixture in Icelandic pop culture. Most recently, he has cut his teeth in the film and television industry with his contributions to the Netflix television series Katla, a mysterious and mind-bending program about a small village that finds itself in the middle of strange occurrences resulting from abnormal volcanic activity. Högni and I had a striking conversation about the challenges for writing music for film and television, balancing the space from which we create music, the value of a curious mind when it comes to composing, and priceless advice for musicians and composers alike who wish to reach more profound depths with the music that they create. Please welcome my esteemed guest, Högni Egilsson. Högni, it's wonderful to finally meet you, and it's great to have you here on the Ambient Discourses podcast, as well as featuring new music on the Stolas Relay Station. Before we dive too much into our music, let's get to know you a little bit more. Tell me more about yourself. I know that you're from Iceland, but a little bit about your musical history and how you've come to fall into this space.
Yes, well, so happy to be here on the podcast. Really great to be able to connect. In short, my name is Högni. I am a composer, a musician, and a performer, a singer, and I've been working out of Iceland, forever. Well, I started releasing music back in 2007, and that was originally with my band that we were active for a number of years. The band is called Hjaltalinn, and it's a band that we put together, a bunch of friends and musicians in sort of in high school almost. We were all part of this one youth choir, which is centered in this middle school or this high school, and this youth choir is the same youth choir that you would hear on Björk's new record, for example. It's called the Ambient Choir. It's a sort of a legendary youth choir, and the conductor is a sort of a grand old lady, visionary pedagogue, luminaire, which inspires countless people throughout her years of being active in this choir since the 60s. I'm mentioning the choir because in retrospect, I feel like that had a big effect on harvesting the band, because we were all very much performing these beautiful choral pieces and both progressive choral pieces, pretty hardcore contemporary Icelandic choral music, but also this sort of lush and beautiful emotive vocal music, and folkloric styles and international styles, and so we were all sort of bred in there, and aside from that, we put together a band. I had been studying violin since I was 5 years old, so I come from a sort of a traditional school of violin playing. And then 16 years old, I pick up the guitar, and I'm fed up with the violin, and I started writing songs, and I feel like melodies. I kind of gravitated towards melodic thinking and melodic writing, melodic making, because playing the violin, I was always playing a melody, a lead, and been listening to that since I was 5 years old. So I kind of picked up the guitar, started writing songs, and found these bunch of friends in this choir, in this school, that we just sort of attracted one another, and we put together this nine people ensemble of, you know, a traditional guitar rock band with drums, as well as clarinets, a clarinet, a bassoon,
oh wow,
violin, and cello. And we put out this record, which, you know, it was kind of inspired by the bands that had all these different wind instruments. Like, I remember Sufjan Stevens had just released what is it, Michigan album or Illinois album or something like that, and it had all these sort of wind instruments like oboes and bassoons and stuff. And I remember we listened to such crafted songwriting, and, you know, songwriting that had such, you know, developed, sophisticated writing, crafted styles. And, you know, Arcade Fire was, you know, blowing up at the time, and they had an accordion, and they were a rock band. And so we kind of like in architecture in Helsinki as well. You know, I'm not sure if you recognize these bands, but it was they also had a huge band with trombones and stuff. So basically we were inspired by, you know, rock bands or pop bands that had a big sort of classical dimension, so to speak, with crafted orchestral arrangements. You know, at first we were just writing songs, but then we sort of put together these friends that were playing these instruments, and I decided, after writing these songs, that I'd enroll into university studying sort of composition. And from there, you know, because I had also studied a little bit of jazz, but never really any classical music on a serious level, except for my violin playing. But anyway, I studied orchestration and counterpoint and music theory. And my brother is a cellist, is a sort of a principal cellist here in Iceland. And so I used my craft, sort of my knowledge and my craft and my studies in university to orchestrate and to arrange for all these instruments. And our first record sort of became, you know, was a sort of a big hit in Iceland. And we made this one sort of, you know, we made this, you know, record, sort of like big record with a big sound, chamber pop. It was sort of art pop, chamber pop, it was coined. And then we did this one hit, which was sort of a cover by a sort of a famous pop star, and he was like an album filler song that sort of like, I don't know, like pretty simple songwriting, simple melody with an easy lyric that was a little bit daft, a little bit, you know, it wasn't Bertolt Brecht or something, you know. It was pretty sort of, you know, on the surface, but cute song. And we covered it because we figured, I mean, we need to make a pop hit. We need to make a hit that sort of punches through. We can't be too arty or too sort of. We were like 21 or something at the time, and so we kind of arranged that song, and that became a huge song in Iceland. It was like, you know, an anthem. You know,
wow.
Yeah, like all kindergarten kids all singing it, everybody singing it. It was like the biggest song of that year. So from that point, it's like I and my mates were like really playing as performers, as pop musicians, as you know, sought after entertainers almost, you know. And so that's sort of a dimension that is never really has really stuck with me in my career in Iceland as an entertainer, or so to speak, as a performer, as a singer. I'm often asked to perform at these big Christmas concerts, you know, where I'll perform Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, and I'll be like with you know, thousands of people, and I'll be there, and people will know me as a singer. But anywho, I'm just sort of going through my career.
It's fascinating because I can hear the classical influences, especially like in your album Two Trains. I
Yes.
gave that a deep listen and was fascinated with the juxtaposition of different types of sounds and arrangements, and in fact the choral introduction, it kind of took me into like this avo part kind of sensation, you know.
Good. Good, I like that. Definitely there's some Eastern harm and pain, some Catholic or even biblical redemption sensibilities there. I mean, I've always brought in a bit of a religious tone in my music. Perhaps it comes from the choral music that we performed in this choir that I mentioned earlier. And I've always sensed that music and music's ability to transcend some sort of deep understanding or deep meditation on the nature of existence, or nature of being, or nature of what it is to be human, so to speak. Whenever I'm encountered with music that has a sacred quality, I, like a lot of people, will be very charmed by that. Even masses, and when I was studying in school, I studied Renaissance music and even Gregorian music, and these sort of tones that have an ancient quality to it, an archaic quality, that the idea of melody and the tension of melody as a message, or as a prayer almost, is something that I always incorporate in my writing. I've been talking about Two Trains, and in my career I shifted towards electronic music at one point when I joined an electronic band, a well-known electronic outfit. So I had
Gus,
exactly,
yes.
exactly, and so that had an effect, because for 5 years I was touring and understanding electronic music, but also performing as a on a big stage and as a singer. So the reason maybe why I'm mentioning all this, because this has had an actual effect on my life as a musician, is that for a long time I was touring and I was performing and I was singing in these different outfits, and I'm performing at these variety of concerts in especially in my home country. But then in sort of recent years, 4 or 5 years ago, I stopped doing that. I stopped touring, and after my years with Gus, I understood that actually my deep love, my deep affection with music comes from the craftiness of music and the writing of music, and to find that that religious tone that I was describing, or dwelling in some sort of progressive mindset of investigating different dimensions of sonic expression, and to have it thoughtful, and have it crafted, and to have it composed, contained in thought, and not just acting on impulse and sensibilities that are superfluous, but to really give my music some time and some and thought. So in that sense, I've now started working more and more in films and film music, and essentially that's of course a medium which is
it's a different beast.
It's a different beast, of course. It's a different beast, exactly, and it's helpful for composers to work in film, because you get budgets to write and produce, but essentially it's a totally different beast, because, as you say, it's of a different. The task is of a different nature. You become a filmmaker, However, I believe that it are the founding principles of music that allow me to penetrate into filmmaking as an active artist or an active creator, an active storyteller, because with the principles of music composition and music making, melodic thought, counterpoint theory, etc., or even just the conceptual work of being a musician, but to have some sort of a command over the music. When I say command over the music, I'm saying to not just write impulsively or just sort of, oh, I'm feeling that this is good, or my instincts are giving this and that. It becomes a crafted measure, a crafted response towards the whole scope of the story. Or, of course, it's a blend of all those things: intuitive action and analytical action and conceptual action. And but I believe that with the principles that I've adapted, or the principles that I put at high stake, that is the principles of melodic craft, the principles of harmonic development, harmonic sophistication, to understand that you can tell all of life's stories with counterpoint, with inner voicings, with harmony, with rhythmic properties. Basically, just giving it a sense of architecture.
Let's pause the conversation for just a moment. We're going to listen to one of Högni's tracks from his latest album, 2 Trains. This is entitled Crash, here on Ambient Discourses.
That is speeding with sumptuous seating, I revel in the feeling. Feel the torque of my insides in a dynamic body, my need of exceeding. I can do whatever and I'm cold, and there is void in the open, just a sound and I'm broken.
it's with those principles that I go into filmmaking, and you know, I don't have years and years of repertoire, but I do enjoy filmmaking, and I do enjoy storytelling, and I do enjoy the mythology of films, and I love cinema. So working in cinema right now is something that I like, and it gives me, you know, pleasure, and it's a fast pace as well. It's a very demanding job, and there's deadlines, and that helps a guy like me who can find a lot of excuses to do anything. But I like deadlines, and I like to have a director, you know, saying, you know, this is the world that I'm envisioning, or this is that, and responding to it. It's almost sometimes a little bit freeing, because you're not responsible essentially from the story from A to Z. But however, you of course, the sonic dimension is just a different dimension than the visual language, but to make it play but to intertwine those two narratives is a big art, and it's a black art, you know, and so I like it. I mean, it's demanding, and you can sometimes you are faced with you're faced with conversations with people that you're like, oh my Lord, how do I get through this? Or he just doesn't understand he does not have any vocabulary for music, but yet he has so much, you know, opinion on it. How can that be, you know? But you're also, but that's fun, you know. It's fun also to dive psychologically into the mind of a director.
So I'm probably one of the few people in my friend group that has actually seen Katla, the whole series on Netflix, largely because I like to expose myself to foreign films, to foreign shows, and I'm also tirelessly fascinated with Icelandic culture. And I found myself absolutely captivated by the soundtrack and the score, and it just helped paint the vivid, bleak picture that the little town or the little village that they found themselves in the storyline. So to your point, the music is just as an important part of the storytelling process in helping paint broader colors and spectrums of emotion and helping set a greater scene. I was reading about your initial take when you started initially working with the director and you had all these ideas. Tell me, expound a little bit about that, about how the process evolved for you, where you originally came in, you had all these ideas and started running with it, and
yeah, I mean, yeah, in a sense, you grow in a way, you know. Probably that's something that I take, you know, that first comes into mind of my experience in writing for this beast of a series, you know, 8-part series with a lot of music, and you know, the director will say, you know, let's make every episode unique, and you're like, all right, that's a lot of music, all right, let's do it. And you're like, you need to, those cues or those episodes need to be ready by Thursday, and it's like Friday, and you have to write and record and produce and mix.
Yeah.
You know, 30 minutes of great quality music or 20 minutes of great quality music before that time, and you're like, oh my Lord, how does one do this? But one catches it becomes a corporation. You know, you work with assistants, and you work with technical engineers, and you work with orchestrators, and it becomes like a vessel or a ship that you steer, become a captain. I, of course, will write all of the music and mix it, but it's you build a team, and it's fantastic. My point is, though, that I was writing, you know, this was my first real, you know, production, you know, a $10 million, $15 million production or whatever, and 20 million, I don't even know how much it was, but so it was a big, you know, Netflix series, a lot of things at stake. It's not just your average little documentary that will be shown in some, you know, couple of times in your local television. and if you fuck it up, and you know might never get a Netflix series again. You feel like, oh my god, if I want to do this thing, I need to deliver some great quality stuff. But the thing is that I'd never done that. I'd never written music for 8-episode psychological thriller about a volcano, working with a hardcore director that's known for, being cut to the teeth, honest and straight to the point, and just a hardcore worker, a great director, but works 150%. He works on a high level all the time, and that's very inspiring, but also very demanding. So I was writing music for this series, and this is a series about volcano that is active, and there's an eruption that isolates the village that is in the periphery of the volcano. And so the village is basically everybody's departed from the village, but there are a few people still in the village. And all of a sudden these strange mystic things happen. People from the past become alive, very mysterious things that you never really get, and you don't really understand why it's there. And all of a sudden there's the lead character, all of a sudden there's a naked woman on top of the volcano, all wearing black and ash, covered in ash, and that's all of a sudden I'm not gonna spoil anything, but yeah, I'll spoil it. And all of a sudden she appears, and just these weird things that happen, and it's a very nightmarish situation. There are people there that die. There's violence. There's a kid that is drowned. It's pretty hardcore sometimes. And so at one point I'm writing this beautiful music, and sort of has a romantic sense to it. And I'm a big romantic. I love romantic music, and I love melody. Like I mentioned, melody is my thing, and I love to write some gorgeous melody that really hits your heart. And I was working with one of the producers. He was coming to the studio to revise the music, and he's actually a famous comedian as well in Iceland, and sort of a comic figure, but a pretty blunt and pretty cold, sort of in gestures. And even though he's a comic and he writes comic stuff, he's deeply sarcastic, and also a lead singer in a heavy metal band. But he writes TV dramas, and he was like, when he heard that music for this scene, he was like, "This is like Christmas music. We are stuck in a nightmare, Högni." And that sort of hit me hard, and it's like, what am I totally getting this wrong? What am I? Christmas music? What does it mean by Christmas music? That's totally not Christmas music. But we are in a nightmare. And I was like, all right, I don't exactly know what he's saying, but I think I get what he's saying. So I sort of started studying more horrifying music. I had never written a horror score. So I was watching, I think, Aliens and the Jerry Goldsmith score from Aliens. I was like, wow, this is lush music, really well. These dissonances, and you have these orchestral instruments, but it's also with synthesized sort of hybrid things. But all of these instruments there's a dissonance in it, and it's well crafted, and it reminds me of Penderecki or Giacinto Scelsi or Luciano Berio or something, avant-garde sort of 20th century contemporary music that I really loved when I was in university, and I listened to and my girlfriend, my fiance, she doesn't like it when I put that on in the morning. She's hardcore contemporary classical music, and I was like, wow, this is because there's a lot of composers that work in film that in the history of film that of course are brought out of the classical world. And Jerry Goldsmith, perfect example of a great composer that sort of goes and writes all these amazing big Hollywood scores. And I love that score, and then I remembered one of my favorite composers, Olivier Messiaen, French composer who wrote Quartet for the End of Times and the Tura Galila Symphony. He's one of Johnny Greenwood's favorite composers. And I decided, I ordered his music theory book on Amazon. And basically it's just a little theory book with his sort of methods of composition. And I did some, very superficial research on the internet, because everything needs to be really there fast-paced. So I just did one day of research. I ordered the book, did one day of research, and I started putting together these different pentatonic chords and these different hexagonic sort of motifs that he works within a contained set of tones, a six-tone series. So I just basically adapted a new composing method, and then I wrote it, and I was like, wow, this is very horrifying music. Ooh, this is, and then I wrote a piano piece, and I did some arrangements for it on the strings, and I was like, wow, I never written music like this. This is horrifying dissonances. This is horrifying. I get scared. And then the guy came, a couple of days later, and he was like, ooh, I get the chills. This reminds me of Alien. Oh my Lord. I was like, wow, okay, this is very analytical and purely intellectual, purely scholarly, purely theoristic. There was nothing impulsive about this. This was only like, okay, I need to adapt a new composing method, technique, and I did it. It had an emotional effect on him. Like, okay, this is what I guess this is the job. You are adapting different techniques, different methods, different. You of course you incorporate your own sensibilities for what is quality in music and what is your instinctual response to good music. But working in especially in film, you have to be a multi-stylist, and a lot of composers that I really look up to, worked in film a lot. Alfred Schnittke, who's a great Russian composer, he wrote 100 films for some Soviet film productions. There was Karkaturian. I don't know. There's just so many great composers, and from that point, I was like, I don't want to sound too shallow or too vain about it, but I was like, okay, well, this is graceful way to go into that medium. It's just to write music and do it with tonal language, do it on notation, and just do it your own. Do the methods that and that you like, and just adapt to different circumstances, adapt to different storytelling. And at the end of the day, I always want to make my scores, my music, being able to be listened to. Creating a soundtrack like Katla, I'm excited for people to listen to it, because I want the music to be able to be enjoyed as well in the living room or with breakfast or whatever. So I'm just enjoying it that way. Right now I'm finishing a score for a love story called Touch for the same director that did Katla, and it's very different music. It's written for a chamber ensemble, for a string quintet with piano and harp, and every time that and it's intimate music. It's much more. I'll say it conveys a lot of happiness. There's not as much melancholy in it. There's some melancholy. There's a slight melancholy and reminiscent of the past, and so to speak. It's a story of a man that goes on to seek and find a love that had departed from his life in the 60s when he was a young student in London, Japanese woman, a young girl, and they were deeply in love. And then from out of nowhere, he was working at her father's restaurant, and she was a waiter. He was a waiter. They fall in love, but all of a sudden everything breaks apart, and she vanishes out of his life. And now 50, 60 years later, he goes when his current wife passes away, he goes on a voyage to find her. And so this is a story of that, and it's just beautiful storyline, which calls for a sweet score, something that is just heartwarming, and no dissonance is there. No Oliver Messiaen with this creepy dissonance. It's just something different.
Probably lots of opportunity for melodic components.
Exactly, and that's what the director wants. That's what the producers want. And in that sense, I just got to let myself free with a bit more precious sort of tone to it. I used pentatonic. Because it's a Japanese story. I used partly Japanese. I used some Japanese motifs and Japanese. I was definitely inspired by Japanese folk music and Japanese pentatonic sort of musical language. I don't know, but then the editor watched the film. He's like, "Oh, this is like Studio Ghibli," and I was like, "All right, well, I'm not a big Studio Ghibli fan, and I don't listen to Joe Hisaishi at all, but that's fantastic that you're getting that response. At least I hope I'm not overdoing it. I don't want to be culturally what's the word, appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't think you can culturally appropriate through music theory. It would be horrible if you couldn't do that.
Yeah. Let's check out another track from Högni. This comes from the Netflix television series drama Katla, and this is entitled Andaðu featuring Hatis Noit here on Ambient Discourses. So, gosh, it's really fascinating to hear you talk about this. I can't imagine the challenge of having to adapt and essentially build a new vocabulary every time you're approaching a new score or a new production. What are some of the things that have kind of helped you along the way in being adaptable and being able to be flexible with the demands of a studio director?
Curiosity. I think it's in one word. I'm always just curious to investigate, and I'm always up for a challenge. I'm a competitive. I brought up in competitive sports, and I just love competing with myself. So if I feel like I don't know something, or that if I get the vibe from somebody that, or even the director that, I'm not feeling it, or no, this is not what we're looking for, I'll be like, okay, how do I make this happen? I'll really focus on it. And you have to let go of your ego. At some point, I thought, really, when I was in university, I thought writing music for film was the lowest of the low. I thought it was like, oh my Lord, that's so, you're not a real composer if you write for film. I was really, I was arrogant in that sense, not in it, but maybe just in a healthy, young and foolish kind of way. Sure. But now it's like, because I felt like if I'm gonna write film, I'm gonna make my own music. I'm gonna make my own thing, and I'm not gonna be, I'm not gonna let people's opinions or demands have any effect on me, or at least that was sort of the idea. But now it's like, I love that, because I understood, for example, through that thing that I mentioned earlier with Katla, I grew a lot from it. I learned so much from it. So it grew me as a composer. So what I think, in essence, it's curiosity, but also hunger for growth, and hunger for attaining new mechanics in my craft. And with every picture, with every project, there is a different sense, a different way of bringing that story into tonality. And I focus on tonality. I focus on that because I believe this is what we need today. I think in music for film, we need tonality to give the film's magic, and tonality as opposed to sound. Of course, sound and mood and atmosphere is very important for so many things, but music that has tonality is, in my view, the music that crunches your heart in a more direct way. You use sound as a parameter, as a property for a new frontier, but with tonality, you sort of you tap into something ancient, I believe, in the genetics of story and man and story, because I believe stories are the genetic unit for the human mind. So with melody, I believe you tap into that and you find that symbolism that is there, and that deep sort of story that is within the picture, or even the story that the director wants to get out there. And working with a director also can be fun, because you're trying to find that and find the essence of what this message of this picture, of this film, is all about. If this is a story about freedom, or if this is a story about redemption, or this is a story about overcoming a monster, like 80% of all the films that we want. Whatever, it's how do we craft that? We build the church, and we build it together, and this church needs so many. It needs a foundation, it needs an architecture, it needs a chorus, it needs a priest, it needs a ritual, all that. So working in story, working in bringing tonality into that religious aspect, and in a sense religious because of ritual and because of its mysterious part, and how it partakes, how religion and how spirituality partakes in human development and human progress, is always fascinating to me. And even though the idea of, if I am religious, would be too complex for me. But I suppose because of my fascination with it, I probably am. But so bringing that aspect to the table is what I try to do every time, and my hunger for new ideas, my hunger for new intellectual property.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good nuggets there that for the listeners' sake, I really hope that they glom onto, especially for new musicians, because when you're starting out, you've got nothing but ego. It's just all me, and it's all about I want to make my mark, so I'm hearing from you an openness and a curiosity and a desire and a hunger to learn and to approach things from a mindset of I don't have all of this figured out, and there's so much more that I need to learn from the people that have gone before me, who have established these patterns or have established frameworks for creating language through music and creating mood and imagery. And I think that's really important, and I wanted to just stop for a moment to just make sure that everyone grabs a hold of that, because if there's one thing that we see way too much of, I think, in music, is the ego, is this idea of that I am more important and I want to be heard, but if I understand the sentiment of where your journey and where you've come from and where your trajectory, where you seem to be heading, is this road of curiosity, and that it's really not about me, it's about how can I help tell the most effective story? How can I contribute to something that is larger than yourself?
Yes, exactly. And to find, to be submissive and surrender towards that. My favorite character, in any story, is the servant, or even the one that doesn't speak a lot, or the ferryman, even though the ferryman, the one that the hero have to go and to get advice from, and he's sort of this sort of timid, sort of small figure, but he somehow puts context into everything, and that's because he listens, and he sort of listens to the simple things, and he's the heart, he's the backbone of the story. I think so. To surrender to that hunger, to that curious need that any creative individual needs to have for him to grow and find his place in this myriad plateau of what it is to be a musician and a composer. To the identity, to find your identity, you have to vanquish your identity.
Yeah, you're right. Your identity kind of almost comes from the fragments of your experiences, all of the different people that you rub shoulders with, the books you read, the things that you consume, and even way beyond that. Yes, exactly. You're a vessel. You're a mechanical. You're a piece of mechanics. You take out all those patterns, all those fragmental stories, music that you sponge in on your quote unquote journey or life story, and your way is to be as functional and as efficient as possibly can be, and to be clear-headed, and to be kind, and to have a vision of sorts, but your vision becomes clear when you are open to everything that's around you, and you start to understand things. I believe
I believe understanding and believe in intellect or scholarly. I really love academia. I don't believe that pure sort of figure way to say this in a courteous manner, to use an academic way to attain the direction that you want to take, but not just purely, express what comes naturally. To really push yourself to learn new things, not just play what you hear. I remember not just to play everything by ear, but to use your mind as well. Don't be too afraid to think about your music and not just be instinctual. I know the sentiment might be a bit radical or be cut into people's teeth, because of course we want people to express themselves freely and to be a musician that lets loose and be freeze on the oh my god, but I think there's a part of that is indulgence and self-indulgence. Oh, I'm playing so nice and it sounds so good, but really to use your logical side of your mind to see, no, this is actually what I'm creating here is a very naive response to the musical creation, and what can I do to systematically change this pattern and use an intellectual method to develop a story here. If you always just play what you feel and play what sounds nice in your sensibility, then you will ultimately repeat yourself. But if you push yourselves to acquire new knowledge, then you ultimately grow. So never be stuck in a moment where you just play what you think is cool.
Yeah, that's worth its weight in gold right there. So if to rephrase and just to make sure that I understand where you're coming from, it's this: you're balancing emotion and your gut instincts and your impulses, but you're also coming to it with mindfulness about your emotions and your expressions, and going and being open to, all right, maybe this isn't quite telling the story or painting the picture the way it should, and then balancing your emotion with intellect and theory and concrete approaches to...
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's like concrete things, rational things that have a bearing, in the systems that we've built. And then your gut and your emotion and your emotional intelligence and your sensitivity. And I think if you're always on that side, the emotive side, the sensitivity side, the sensuous, the things that feel, the things that are in your guts, or then I believe you will indulge yourself in them, and you will find the pleasures of it. And to find the pleasures of it is ultimately not finding the pain that you need to strive for the betterment of your music.
Yeah, so it's almost like you need that darkness to contrast with the light to offer that perspective. Otherwise, all is just a schmaltzy kind of everything's pleasant. Yeah. But it's really profound. And I think there's a crossover, for me at least, into life, even beyond music. This idea of not just embracing all the good things, all the happy things, all the pleasantries of life, but also equally embracing the pain and the things that we have to endure as humans.
Yes, and I think that's the growth. That's the growth, and I think that's being generous in your music is to work hard, taking those. That's the generosity. If you work hard in taking both of those dimensions, if you work on them, then that generosity is the things that you bring out have a generosity about them. But if you only do things that indulge yourself, then what is the message of the things that you are giving?
Right.
If you didn't have to strive, or you didn't have to suffer at least a little bit for it.
No, I think that's a very profound truth that I think that has universal tones to it, that if you really want to create something beautiful, there has to be this guttural effort, a little bit of suffering, a little bit of pain, to also enhance the sweetness. I mean, it's just like cooking, you can't just make it this big sweet mess, add some spice into it to complement and to bring out different flavors that didn't exist before.
Yeah, just make a mayonnaise out of anchovies and put that, on your bread, and that's anchovy mayonnaise is something that I know my girlfriend will not like it the first time she tries it, but third time she tries it, she'll go and she'll understand the darkness of it, the real depth of flavor that it has, and the savory and the pungent and the little bit weird, and then she'll appreciate it. But it'll feel very off at first. Cutting down the anchovies, putting that oil and putting that papers, and you'll be like, oh, that's very acidity, that's very savory, and that doesn't taste like food, that tastes like the sea, oh my lord. And then you're like, that is some tones to it that I've never understood before in cooking. And then you're like, ooh, let's put that on our hamburger next time.
Let's take another break from the conversation for just a moment. We're going to listen to another track from Högni's album Two Trains. This is entitled Andaðu, which means breathe in Icelandic, here on Ambient Discourses. looking forward, so you've got that production in the works that you're working on. What does the future look like for you? Does your horizon look like a lot more film production, or do you have any personal expressions in the works?
Well, yes, that's the thing. I finished this. I'm going into the mixing stage right now for this new film that I've been working on last 4, 5, 6 months. But last year I was working fully on my solo record, and now when I'm back from my holiday, thankfully I'm heading to Catalonia to Spain and France tomorrow for a little vacation with my family, and then when I'm back in Iceland, I'll go on a big Highland horse trip where we'll be riding in the middle of nowhere. It'll be quite an experience. I look forward to that. Very deep Icelandic nature experience. And then in August, it depends on the weather. If the weather is very nice in Iceland, which is rarely occurs, I'll probably be playing more tennis than making music. But definitely in when fall comes, I'll be working on my record, and I want to finish that this fall, and so I'm looking very much forward to that. And that's a big solo record that probably is going to be a long one. I've at least made a lot of music, and now I'm still at a point where I'm like, I want to trash all of the music that I made last year and make some new music for this album. But I need to control myself a little bit. I'm not sure how practical that is, but still, you never know. Kill your darlings.
I've heard more than one musician now over the course of conversations that they never throw anything away, because you never know. You give something breathing room, and you come back to it, a few months later, and you might have a different perspective.
That's true, and that's what I'm actually looking forward to. And like a lot of these tracks are electronic pieces that I've been working on my. I built my modular synthesizer, and it's a sort of a new dimension for me, electronic music production. So I was working a lot on electronic music last year. But then what I started doing is I started arranging those modular synthesizers for string quartets. So you have all these sequential, patterns, like 15 tone patterns that you can write for organic instruments, and that all of a sudden sounded awesome. So it basically is still an organism, that album, and I look forward coming back to those tracks and those songs and compiling music. I haven't sung anything for the album, which I think I will on a few occasions. So it's in the mix. I think it will be talking about striving and suffering and conjuring through. It will be definitely a lot of that, because it won't come easy. But I look forward to it, and I feel empowered after this film to be creative and to just make it happen. And then next year probably will be, there's a couple of sort of big film projects, a series and a film that I it depends. It's the film business is a little bit, it's a big of a beast. You never exactly know what takes off, but yeah, I assume next year there will be a couple of sort of projects like this I'm doing right now. But yeah, this is my next year or so.
Let's check out one more track before we close out this interview with Högni. This also comes from the Netflix television series Soundtrack from Katla. And please give me a little grace for the pronunciation here. This is really challenging my Icelandic pronunciation abilities. This track is entitled Gratandi, thig, Beiði, featuring Eron, Thor, Jónsson, here on Ambient Discourses. one closing question. So I'm thinking about all of the aspiring bedroom musicians out there that are creating their own cinematic music and maybe have been wanting to dip their toes into film scoring and whatnot. What would do you have any bits of advice for musicians that are probably early in those stages, and what might help them realize some of their dreams, or at least be further along in the process?
I think probably, there are two things that you definitely need to enter the film side of the music industry, music business. There is basically your music. Don't cut corners in your music. Don't pay money to record good quality music. So what I'm saying is don't use sample libraries too much. Those things make your music undervalued because it lacks the human sentiment that any listener will pick out. Whenever I work with the directors here, it's like they will hear that straight away. I hear that this is real. I feel this is great. I get a lot of scent from some sort of like rubber instruments, like these false instruments, and I don't like it. I can hear there's a real musician there. Oh my God, it sounds amazing. I want to hear his breath. It's almost like that. So don't fall into the pit of just buying a lot of sample libraries and putting them together and call it an orchestra. That's not it. I think deepening your sense for harmony and music theory is always a very important thing, because it makes your penmanship better, and penmanship I think is important as well, to write well, to write beautifully, to write melody that has a flavor, has a story, and again, when you play stuff that sounds good in your ear, it often doesn't taste very strong. If it's placed weirdly, if all of a sudden you hit a weird note and you go, ooh, that's a weird note, that's probably because it's the note that you need to investigate. Mm-hmm. So think in smaller units. Think about your music in smaller stories. Think of melody as a series of few tones, and picking those few, it might sound a bit stupid, like what, it needs to be bigger, but really music is only a few tones, a few intervals of, the strongest theme can be 3 tones. Ooh, that's a chilling motif. Like, ooh, it reminds me of a horror, whatever. So sometimes picking out a few tones and repeating them and making them stick with you can be very powerful. So record good quality music, good quality sounds, but also, make the writing good. That is, make the arrangement good, the bass good, the melody good. Make it a good, proper piece of music. It doesn't have to be long. It can be just a few measures, 8 bars, 12 bars that are repeated. But if it sounds good on your piano, the tones that is, then it will sound good on your prophets and your synthesizers and your modular synthesizers and your strings and your clarinets. And so if it sounds good on just a few piano tones, if it gives you emotional impact just on the few piano tones, then it's good stuff. And then from there you can start bringing in your fancy $10,000 synthesizers and hire your orchestras or whatever. So that's basically what I'm saying, is that in my story of talking to directors, talking to agents, and sending my stuff over to famous agents in Hollywood or whatever, it's never been my personality or anything that has gotten anybody's attention. You know, it's always the music. It's not how I sell myself. It's not the way that I perceive myself. It's not the way that I talk, or, you know, yes, it helps when you've gotten the attention of somebody that you come out as a nice gentleman, a nice fellow, courteous, and because the next step will always be, can I trust that individual to do what it takes? But the first thing, the impression of, ooh, I love that music. It gives me the chill, or it gives me goosebumps. So that's the first basically step. Give people goosebumps, and from there the conversation going to go, you know, I'm trustworthy to write music for your expensive film. So basically from there you have to find, you know, once you made a series of 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces that have a cinematic quality and you hear them, you're like, ooh, I can really envision an amazing film on that music. Then you have to somehow cunningly, maybe, or naturally, get in a good connection with a talented director. And if you find a talented director that you see is on a trajectory, and you see, wow, I saw this short film at this film festival, or even just going, you know, if you have a film school somewhere in your neighborhood or in your, you know, often that's probably the best way to start. You know, befriending a great. That's how Ludwig Göransson, you know, started his amazing career. I think he was just making a school film with Jordan Peele, or I don't know the names, but anywho, it's like, if you get in connection with a good director very early on, then you'll probably be the one who gets for this first film. So I think those two things, basically, you need your music has to be of amazing quality, and cheap is cheap. You know, if you don't spend any money on it, it probably isn't worth a lot. If you spend a little bit of money on the recordings, then probably it will have identity and have something great to offer. And from there you can start. It's a bit of a dating game, you know. You have to we have a little bit of a personality that has you need to connect with some people, and it's a very social industry. You have to talk a lot with people, and you have to be able to investigate ideas. You have to understand dramaturgy, you have to understand storytelling, you have to be curious about filmmaking, and you know, I wasn't the biggest film buff when I started this, but now I'm actually, I love drama. I used to work in theater, and I love dramaturgy. So bringing dramaturgy, bringing the essence of storytelling, of drama, of literature, you know, having a sense for what literature is also very important. Because if you have anything to offer to the story in literary terms, then the director will see it as a benefit to have you in his team, because you will always give him some sort of a inspiration for, you know, what can come out of the story. So it's these different facets that come together. But I don't think it's too. I don't think it looks like a project that is so hard to do. You know, getting into the film business, getting your first gig, whatever. But I think once a musician or a composer, you know, really puts an effort into his music, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then something great will happen.
Yeah, I think that's really, really solid wisdom there. The idea of really having, kind of establishing your voice, don't cut corners. But you could also argue too, not just spending, you know, money to improve its quality, but also investing yourself mentally and emotionally into your pieces, and really going into some of the deep places.
Yes, I mean, definitely. And that from everything we talked about earlier about investing, you know, putting yourself at stake and putting your life and your story at stake to really yearn for that music that you're creating. If you're a performer, if you're a great performer, use that, definitely. If you're a violinist, if you're a cellist, if you're a bassoonist, use that. clarinetists. I mean, you hear a lot of cellos in today's theaters, film theaters, but in 5 years, somebody might come along and you'll hear just awesome bassoon scores or awesome saxophone scores. And so if you're a performer of instruments, then that's your key, because you can get good performances just by yourself. If you're not a good performer on your instruments, you need to be a good programmer on your keys, on your synthesizers, and then ultimately those will be your instruments. But then you might want to say, hey, I made this awesome synthesizer patch, an awesome programming patch with amazing MIDI information, and you'll say, you know what, I'm just going to say it. I want to hear this on 3 harps. I want to hear how this is played, these weird MIDI, effects, or these weird MIDI notes, and I want all of this to be arranged for 3 harps. Don't hesitate. Get somebody that that knows how to orchestrate, knows how to notate stuff, to write it out for a harpist, and call somebody who's a harpist and say, I'll pay you $250 to come here for 2 hours, or $200 for 2 hours, whatever. And can you record this harp piece that I just did? Fantastic. I'll bring my harp, and then with $200 you have an amazing piece for 3 harps, and you'll be like, wow, this is my little hook on my fishing rod, that is wanted to work in, and it'll be fresh and it'll be creative. And that's also taking a step into the unknown, saying, like, I've never recorded harp, I don't know, but I think it's gonna work. Let's just do it.
Yeah, there's a sense of curiosity there and adventure, like
yes,
going into unknown areas with just kind of a blind confidence, really,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Högni, I really just so much appreciate this conversation. It's wonderful and fun and fascinating to me to hear perspectives from other musicians and composers from around the world. I mean, you've just got a whole wealth of knowledge and experience there that I think that a lot of other people can, if they have the right amount of curiosity and desire to learn and desire to grow. I think that you've given them quite a bit to take away, meditate on, start internalizing, and then working out in their life. And for that, I appreciate your time.
Of course, and it's pleasure is mine. Definitely, I can hear how generous you are with your public, with your audience, and the work that you're doing, and I appreciate to reaching out and talking.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's this journey for me of so, not to make this about me, but for me, I had this mental switch about maybe a year or two ago, where I really stopped focusing on what I can create and what I'm making, and I thought, there are other musicians out there that are probably really hungry to be heard, where the market is incredibly flooded and saturated.
Yeah.
No shortage of things to listen to. And I thought it'd be an interesting practice and an interesting discipline to stop and listen intently, and to have conversations with other musicians and go, I really liked this piece that you created, and here's why, and here's the things that it did for me mentally and emotionally and maybe even spiritually, and give them the kind of active listening audience that I know that I would love, as a musician, as a creator. And so it's kind of flipped this around to be a kind of a selfless expression. I know it's all packaged up in a podcast and it has my name on it, but that's not even the important part. The important part is that I want people to feel heard, right? And
Yeah, and I mean, and in it's a different landscape than it was. Like, it's just so. It's also important for the producers, the creators to, it's just it's such an important part of the process is to the critique, the hearing what's under the surface, what the message is. It gives the context that is paramount for music to thrive, to become. I think music will always survive and be there, and people. It's like water. It's something that we all need, and will. It's a dimension. It's just something that is necessary. But I feel when with the streaming landscape and the endless saturation of music, it's harder to do critique and to write. There's less and less written about music. There's less and less talked about music. But in a medium like this podcast, it's important for the context of it, for the importance of it to fulfill what's needed for the music to live through all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Högni, I want to be respectful for your time. Thank you so much again, my friend. Thank you so much for all the things that you've created, and I look forward to hearing more great works come in from you. And thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Have a lovely rest of your week.
Thank you. My thanks to Högni Egilsson for the remarkable conversation. It has left an indelible impression with me, and I walked away learning something brand new. So thank you. I also want to thank the fine folks over at Erased Tapes Records for the interview and the music hookup. I appreciate you guys very much, as usual. You can find more from Högni at his Instagram profile. Just open up the Instagram app and search for Högni Egilsson. That's HOGNIEGILSSON. You can also find more wonderful artists and music from Erased Tapes at erasedtapes.com. Thanks so much for listening to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences in sonic landscapes. Until next time, take care.